I was halfway inside my tent when something whispered my name from the darkness. Not shouted, not called, whispered, soft, careful, like whoever or whatever was out there didn't want anyone else to hear it. Jake. I froze with one hand on the zipper. The fire had burned down to glowing embers. The woods around me were black as coal. The Appalachian mountains stretched for miles in every direction, swallowing every bit of moonlight beneath their endless canopy. Then I heard it again. Jake. Closer this time, maybe 20 feet away. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The voice wasn't coming from the woods. It was coming from the side of my tent, right outside the thin layer of fabric. I couldn't see a shadow, couldn't hear footsteps. Just that voice, waiting, patient, as if it knew I'd eventually answer. And the worst part, nobody on earth should have known where I was camping. To explain how I ended up in that situation, I have to take you back to 3 days earlier. Now I've spent most of my adult life camping. Nothing extreme. I'm not one of those guys who climbs mountains with frozen beards and talks about embracing the wilderness. Nah, I just like getting away from people. After 30 years working construction, sometimes the best vacation is sitting next to a campfire where nobody asks you for anything. Back in October of 2021, I decided to take a solo trip into a remote section of Appalachia near the border of Kentucky and West Virginia. Beautiful country, dense forests, steep ridges, tiny forgotten towns, and according to locals, more ghost stories than you could count. Of course, I didn't believe any of that, at least not then. The drive took nearly 6 hours. Cell service disappeared long before I reached the trailhead. By late afternoon, I parked my truck beside an old gravel road and started hiking. The forest felt different almost immediately. Not scary, just old. That's the only way I can describe it. The trees were massive. Some looked centuries old. Everything seemed untouched, like the mountain had been watching people come and go for generations. About 3 miles in, I found the perfect spot. A small clearing near a creek, flat ground, plenty of firewood, no signs of other campers. Perfect. I set up camp, cooked dinner, and spent the evening listening to the water flowing over rocks. Honestly, it was peaceful. The kind of peaceful that city people spend thousands of dollars trying to find. As darkness settled in, I sat by the fire and stared into the woods. That's when I noticed the first strange thing. The forest had gone completely silent. No crickets, no frogs, no owls, nothing. Now, if you've spent enough time outdoors, you know that's unusual. Nature is noisy, even at night. But suddenly, everything had stopped. I remember joking to myself, great, either a bear's nearby, or I'm about to become the opening scene of a horror movie. I laughed. The woods didn't. Something about that silence felt wrong. Still, I eventually convinced myself I was imagining things and climbed into my tent. Around midnight, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. Crunch, 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 slow and deliberate, circling the campsite. At first, I assumed it was a deer, maybe a raccoon, but these steps sounded heavier, much heavier. I grabbed my flashlight and listened. The footsteps stopped instantly. The silence returned. 5 minutes passed, nothing. Then, crunch, 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 this time on the opposite side of camp. Like something was moving around me. Watching, I unzipped the tent and shined my flashlight into the darkness. Nothing. No eyes. No animals. No movement. Just trees. Thousands of trees. Eventually, I convinced myself exhaustion was playing tricks on me. I managed a few hours of sleep before sunrise. The next morning, everything seemed normal again. Birds chirping, water running, sunlight filtering through the leaves. I actually laughed about the whole thing. Funny how daylight can make you feel stupid for being scared. After breakfast, I spent the day exploring nearby trails. Around noon, I found something odd. An old campsite, abandoned years ago, maybe decades. Rusted cans, collapsed fire ring, pieces of weathered tarp tangled in tree roots. But one thing caught my attention. A wooden sign nailed to a tree. The lettering was faded, but still readable. It said, "Don't follow the voices." That's it. No explanation, no context, just those 4 words. Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking the same thing. Some local teenager made it as a joke. That's exactly what I thought. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had wanted people to see it, to remember it. That evening, I returned to camp. The silence started again just before sunset. Every sound in the forest simply disappeared, like somebody had pressed mute on the entire mountain. And then I noticed something else. A light, far away among the trees. At first I thought it was another camper, but the light wasn't moving normally. It drifted, gliding between trunks, sometimes disappearing, sometimes reappearing farther away. I watched it for nearly 20 minutes. Eventually it vanished completely. I told myself it was probably another hiker. Still, something about it bothered me. I went to bed earlier than usual, and that's when everything changed. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. The campfire was dead. The air felt colder, much colder. Then I heard my name. Jake. The voice sounded distant, maybe 50 yards away. I sat upright. My heart instantly started pounding. Nobody should have been out there. Nobody. Then it came again. Jake. Closer. The voice sounded familiar somehow, like someone I knew. Maybe a relative, maybe an old friend. I couldn't place it. The strange thing was how badly I wanted to follow it. That sounds crazy, I know, but the voice felt comforting, inviting, like someone needed help. I actually started reaching for my boots. Then I remembered the sign. Don't follow the voices. A chill ran through my body. I stayed inside the tent. The voice continued for nearly 10 minutes, each time getting closer, each time sounding more familiar. Then suddenly it stopped. Complete silence. I thought it was over. I was wrong. A few minutes later, I heard breathing, right outside the tent. Slow, heavy, human. The sound moved around the campsite, circling me. I held my flashlight so tightly my hand cramped. Every instinct screamed at me to look outside, but another instinct screamed louder. Don't. The breathing continued for almost an hour. Then it disappeared. I didn't sleep again that night. The moment sunrise arrived, I packed my gear. I didn't care about finishing the trip anymore. I wanted out. Fast. The hike back felt longer than before. The woods seemed darker. Every snap of a branch made me jump. About halfway to the trailhead, I noticed footprints beside the trail. Bare footprints. Human. The problem was, it had dropped below 40 degrees overnight. Nobody would be walking barefoot out there. The tracks followed the trail for several hundred yards, then suddenly left it, straight into the forest. I kept moving, trying not to think about it. When I finally reached my truck, relief washed over me. I threw my gear in the bed and climbed inside. Then I saw something under the windshield wiper. A folded piece of paper. My stomach dropped. I unfolded it. Written in shaky handwriting were 6 words. You should have followed me. I stood there staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was reading. Nobody had been at the trailhead when I arrived. Nobody knew where I'd camped. Nobody should have been able to leave that note. I looked around the empty parking area. Nothing. No vehicles. No people. Just mountains. I drove away immediately. I never went back. For months, I tried convincing myself there was a logical explanation. Maybe another camper. Maybe a prank. Maybe someone had been watching me. Honestly, that possibility scars me even more. But here's the part I can't explain. About a year later, I was showing photos from the trip to a friend. Most were normal pictures of trees, creeks, and campsites. Then I reached a photo taken near sunset on the second day, the one where I'd seen the strange light. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. Then I zoomed in. Standing between two trees was a figure, tall, thin, almost blending into the darkness, watching the campsite, watching me. I don't know how long it had been there. I don't know what it was, and frankly, I don't want to know. These days, I still go camping, just not alone, and definitely not in that part of Appalachia, because every now and then, usually around midnight when the house is quiet, I'll wake up suddenly, and for a split second, I'll remember that voice, the way it sounded familiar, the way it wanted me to follow. And sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I had stepped into those woods, if I had answered, if I had followed the voice calling my name into the darkness. Honestly, I think part of me already knows, and that's exactly why I'll never go back. I'm not going to tell you the exact moment I should have packed up and left, because the truth is, there were too many of those moments. Out there in the Appalachian backcountry, you don't get one clear warning. You get a series of small ones, like nature gently tapping you on the shoulder, then eventually grabbing you by the throat. And by the time you realize the difference, you're already too far in. My name is Chris Walker, and this happened during a solo camping trip in the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Tennessee. I've been camping most of my adult life, not the tourist kind. I mean real backcountry stuff. No RVs, no crowded parks. Just me, a pack, and enough supplies to last a few days. I always preferred it that way, because silence, when you're used to it, stops being empty. It starts feeling honest. That trip was supposed to be no different. 3 days, one ridge, one small valley campsite I'd picked off an old topo map. Nothing special, except it wasn't marked on newer maps anymore. I didn't think much of that at the time. Old trails disappear all the time. I started my hike late morning. The air was cool, heavy with that damp Appalachian smell, wet leaves, pine sap, and something earthy you can't quite name. By early afternoon, I was already deep enough that cell service was gone. That part didn't bother me. In fact, I liked it. No calls, no distractions, just the sound of boots hitting dirt. The trail was faint but still visible. Old, but used enough that I didn't feel completely alone. At least, at first. The first strange thing happened around 3 p.m. I came across a stack of rocks, not natural, not random, a cairn, trail markers, except these weren't spaced like normal markers. They were too close together, like someone had been pacing or circling. I remember laughing a little. Either somebody's really lost, I said out loud, or really bored. It felt stupid talking to myself, but out there, you do it anyway, just to hear something human. I kept moving. Another hour in, the forest got thicker. The trail became harder to follow, and then I noticed something that made me stop. The trees. Some of them had marks on them, fresh scratches. Too high for animals, too deep for casual hikers. and always facing the same direction, toward the trail, not away from it. That's when the first real discomfort set in. You know that feeling when your brain quietly says, "Hey, something's off here," but you ignore it because everything still looks normal. I checked my map, still on track, still heading toward the campsite. So I continued. Bad decision number 1. By late afternoon, I reached the clearing. It was smaller than I expected, maybe 20 feet across, a shallow slope leading down toward a creek. Perfect for camping. Too perfect, honestly, but I didn't question it. I set up my tent, filtered water, and made dinner. The sun dipped behind the ridge faster than I liked. That's one thing about Appalachia. Sunsets don't fade, they vanish. One moment it's light, the next it's dark enough that the forest feels like it's pressing in. I built a small fire anyway. Old habit. Fire makes everything feel less unknown. For a while, everything was fine. Just crackling wood, occasional wind, the creek moving in the distance like a low whisper. Then I heard something else, a voice, far off. Maybe it was faint enough that I almost convinced myself it was wind passing through branches. But it wasn't random sound. It had rhythm, like someone calling out words in intervals, not shouting, not talking, calling. I stood up slowly, listened. Nothing. Then again, same direction, downhill, toward the creek. I told myself it was another camper. That would have made sense, except I hadn't seen another trail marker in hours. Still, I called out, "Hello." Silence. Then the voice answered, not with words, with my name, or something close to it. Cries, drawn out, slow, like it was testing the shape of the word. I froze. That part matters, because fear doesn't always hit like panic. Sometimes it just tightens, like a hand slowly closing around your thoughts. I grabbed my flashlight and aimed it toward the trees. Nothing. No movement, no sound, just darkness between trunks. I convinced myself it was another hiker messing around. A joke, a bad one. I sat back down by the fire, tried to ignore it. That's when the second thing happened. The fire went quiet, not out, just quieter, like even the crackling had decided to stop. Then I heard footsteps, not rushing, not heavy, just slow walking, circling the edge of the clearing. I turned the flashlight. Nothing. Turned again. Nothing. But the footsteps didn't stop. They kept going. Around me, in a full loop, like something was walking the perimeter of my campsite and making sure I knew it. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed by the fire until it turned to glowing ash. Every few minutes, I'd hear it. Step, pause, step, pause. Always just outside the light, never inside it. At some point, I started doing something stupid. I started talking back, not full sentences, just noise. Yeah, okay, I hear you. I don't know why. Maybe to prove I wasn't afraid. Maybe because I was. Around 2 a.m., the footsteps stopped. Completely. And that silence was worse, because now there was no pattern, no warning, just stillness. I sat there listening to the forest, waiting for something to continue. That's when I heard breathing. Close. Too close. Not behind me. Not far. Inside the clearing, like something was standing just beyond the firelight, watching me breathe. I didn't move, didn't speak. Then, from the darkness, came a sound I still can't explain properly. A cough. Human. Wet. Like someone trying to clear their throat after being silent too long. I swung the flashlight immediately, and for half a second, I saw it. A shape. Tall. Too still. Not walking away. Not approaching. Just standing where the light barely reached. Then it stepped back into darkness, slowly, like it knew exactly how much I could see. I didn't wait for morning after that. I packed everything in near total panic, tried to keep my hands steady, failed. The whole time, I kept feeling like I was being watched from multiple directions, not one, more, like the forest had split its attention. I left before sunrise, hiked fast, almost running, but here's the part I didn't expect. The trail wasn't the same. The path I came in on was gone, completely. In its place was fresh undergrowth, like it hadn't been used in years. I checked my map. Nothing matched. I was still moving forward, but forward didn't lead anywhere familiar anymore. And that's when I realized something I wish I hadn't. The clearing I camped in wasn't on any modern map either. I had stepped into a place the forest was still actively hiding. I made it out eventually. I always do. But I never told anyone the full story. Because the worst part isn't what I heard at night. It's what I found in my backpack 2 days later. A piece of bark, fresh, still damp, with deep scratches carved into it. 4 letters. Not my name. Just one word. Stay. And the strangest part, I never remember picking it up. If this story kept you looking over your shoulder tonight, make sure you watch the next nightmare on this channel. There's another Appalachian encounter waiting for you there. And trust me, it gets even darker.